The scent of cinnamon bread filled my kitchen when the phone rang. Sharp, sudden, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my chest tugged. Selena, the voice purred, smooth, familiar with a sour aftertaste. "It's Maribel. Grandma passed this morning." I didn't speak. She continued, "I suppose you're still alone." My fingers clenched the warm ceramic mug. Outside, frost clung to the edge of the window, but it wasn't the cold that made my stomach tighten. I hadn't heard her voice in 10 years, and yet she still knew how to cut. "Where are you listening from? Ever been mocked by someone who stole everything from you? Subscribe, now this one's for you." Maribel and I used to share a bed when the storms got too loud. We whispered under quilts, counting lightning, pretending we'd never turn into our parents. But we did, in the worst ways. Maribel became my father's favorite, charming, polished, always knowing the right thing to say. He called her his bright one. I was the shadow beside her. Still, I tried to be good. I studied harder, won speech contests, baked pies with Grandma Sybil just to feel seen. But when Evan came along, it felt like finally someone chose me. He was quiet, thoughtful, told me he loved my silences. He asked me to marry him on the old stone bridge behind our house, right where the wisteria bloomed each May. I said yes, believing stupidly that love was something Maribel wouldn't touch. 3 months before the wedding, he changed. Detached, distant. I thought it was work, stress. Then I found the texts. Her name, her words, his replies. She didn't even deny it. "Evan was never truly yours," she told me, eyes gleaming like she pitied me. The night they got engaged, I packed a duffel bag. I took the ring off my finger and buried it beneath Grandma's rosebush. Then I left Windhaven Crest without telling a soul. I moved 3 states away, changed my number, built walls so high even my past couldn't climb them. I worked nights, tutored kids, slept on borrowed couches. But every brick of my new life, I laid myself. 5 years later, I met Callan, a man who didn't ask for noise, only truth. He never tried to fix me, just stood beside me while I rebuilt. And I did, with time, with scars, with love. I never told anyone in Windhaven I'd married. Never posted a photo, let them believe I was still alone. Because sometimes it's better to be underestimated. Until now, Maribel's call had cracked the past wide open, and Windhaven Crest was waiting. Windhaven Crest hadn't changed. The fog still rolled low across the fields at dawn. The old iron gate creaked as I pushed through, its rust biting at my palm. The family house loomed ahead, Victorian, proud and cold. Wind whistled through the bare trees, the same wind that once carried our laughter. Now it carried whispers. I stepped through the front door. Polished wood, sandalwood, and sorrow in the air. Aunt Carlene gasped. Someone dropped a glass in the dining room. She came, they said, as if I were a ghost. I caught sight of Grandma's portrait in the foyer, still smiling with her garden gloves on. My heart twisted. Then came the heels, sharp, deliberate. I turned, and there she was, Maribel, her hair lighter now, nails painted the exact shade of wine she held. A smirk danced at the edge of her lips. "Well," she said, raising her glass slightly, "didn't expect to see you here. Still no +1. The words didn't sting, not like they used to, but my fingers curled against my coat pocket anyway. I gave her nothing, not a smile, not a flicker. Just silence. Her eyes scanned me. I could feel her calculating, like she always did, sizing me up, looking for cracks. "I mean," she added with a faux sigh, 10 years is a long time. People move on, some build empires, some... She paused, eyes gleaming. Hide. The hum of the radiator kicked in. Somewhere a child coughed. Time slowed. I leaned closer, voice soft. "You're right," I said. "Some of us do hide, and some of us just wait for the right moment." Her smile faltered, just slightly. I turned before she could answer, my heels quiet against the hardwood. She still thought I came alone. She had no idea what was coming next. The chapel smelled of wax and wilted lilies. A violin played softly near the altar, a song Grandma once hummed in her garden. I sat in the second pew, alone by choice. Maribel floated past in a navy coat, whispering to cousins, brushing cheeks, receiving sighs of admiration. She always did know how to perform grief. Uncle Martin leaned in behind me. "Selena," he said low. "Didn't expect you back. You holding up okay?" I nodded. He didn't ask about my life, no one did. To them, I was still the girl left behind, the one who vanished, the one without a ring. The reception was held in the family parlor. Fire crackled. Forks clinked against porcelain. Laughter buzzed in clusters except near me. I stood near the buffet, stirring my coffee slowly. Black. No sugar. Maribel's voice pierced through the room, louder than it needed to be. "Evan and I were just in Montauk," she said. business and beach time. He's presenting at a tech summit next month. Several aunts cooed. Someone asked about her latest press feature. She glanced at me then, a flick of her eye, a private jab. I sipped my coffee. Oh, Maribel added with false innocence. I sometimes forget how lucky I am. Not everyone is meant for marriage, right? A ripple of tight smiles followed. No one looked at me. I placed my cup down gently, the ceramic kissed the tablecloth. She's trying too hard, I thought. The tighter she smiled, the closer she was to cracking. I caught my reflection in the window, calm, collected, not the girl she once broke, and I knew tomorrow everything would shift. Because I wasn't staying quiet. And I wasn't staying invisible. Not anymore. The garden out back still smelled like rain and rosemary. Same stone path, same broken swing tied to the willow. I walked slowly, my boots pressing into wet leaves. The cold brushed my cheeks, but it grounded me. That bridge, the one with cracked railings, it was where he proposed. Where I said yes, thinking we were forever. Selena. His voice stopped me. I turned. Evan stood a few feet away. Gray coat, no ring. I saw you at the service, he said. You look strong. I raised an eyebrow. 10 years does that to a person. He laughed, short and nervous. I guess I deserve that. Silence stretched between us, heavy with old echoes. Things with Maribel, he began. They haven't been good. Not for a long time. I waited. She's different now. Cold. Always performing. He looked at me then the same way he used to when he still pretended to love me. I made a mistake, he said. You were the real thing. I didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked, my voice barely above the breeze. He stepped closer. If there's any part of you that... There isn't. The words left clean, sharp. I took a step back. He blinked. I'm not that girl anymore, Evan. I looked down at the cracked stones beneath us. She cried here once, but I buried her, right under this bridge. I turned to leave but paused. I hope you find peace, I said, even if it comes without applause. As I walked away, I texted one word to Callan. Tomorrow. The town theater glowed gold under winter lights. Velvet curtains, brass railings, candles flickering in every corner. I stood just outside the main doors, breath frosting the air. Callan fixed the collar of his coat, then reached for my hand. You ready? He asked. His voice always sounded like calm before rain. I nodded. He squeezed once, then we walked in. Conversations dimmed. A string quartet trailed off mid-note. Dozens of eyes turned first at me, then at him. Maribel stood near the punch table, her lips parted, wineglass tipping slightly in her hand. I watched her blink, once, twice. Her jaw tensed, smiles stiffened. I leaned into Callan, resting a palm on his chest. His hand found the small of my back. Aunt Vivian's voice cut through. Selena, darling, you never said you were married? I smiled gently. There's a lot I never said. Callan extended a hand to her. Callan Breyer, architect, husband, father. He said it with that soft authority that made rooms settle. Whispers spread like wildfire. You mean Selena's not single? Why didn't she tell anyone he's gorgeous? Look at them. Maribel approached, heels clicking fast now, composure cracking at the edges. Well, she said, voice sharp as ever, you really had us fooled. What's next, secret twins? Callan tilted his head. No twins, just peace and privacy. Maribel's eyes flared. I didn't know you'd married, she hissed low. Her tone no longer sweet, just sour. I know, I replied, meeting her gaze. You never asked. She stared at me, but I didn't flinch, didn't break. For the first time, she looked small. And I wasn't hiding anymore. The side hallway smelled like varnish and dust. Low lights, red carpet beneath my heels. Maribel grabbed my arm, pulling me into the costume storage room. She slammed the door. What the hell was that? Her whisper cut sharper than a scream. You couldn't give me one night, you had to show up like that. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I came to say goodbye to Grandma, not to play chess with you. She laughed bitter empty. You humiliated me. I tilted my head. I didn't say a word. Her hands trembled, but she tried to hide it. Why didn't you ever tell anyone that you moved on, that you got married? I stepped forward, quiet. Because it was never about making you jealous, Maribel. It was about peace. She scoffed. Bullshit. You wanted a scene. Well, congratulations. I stared at her, really looked. The painted-on perfection, the panic in her pupils. I didn't plan to humiliate you, I said, voice low. You did that all by yourself. She went silent. Somewhere beyond the door, a violin started again, slow, fragile. I turned to leave, hand already on the knob. Behind me, her breath caught, and I knew the war she started 10 years ago was finally turning. 3 days after the gala, I booked the town gallery. Grandma loved paintings. She said brushstrokes told truths words couldn't handle. So I called it the silence between us. A tribute, an invitation. I told Callan it won't be revenge. It'll be reflection. He nodded, his eyes calm like always, but he understood what I really meant. Lyra sat beside me that night, knees curled under her markers scattered across the floor. Draw what you remember, I said softly. About people who hide knives behind smiles. She blinked thought for a moment, then started. 3 figures, one with roses in her hands, one with a mask, one with her back turned watching quietly. It took her 2 days. When she finished, I framed it in oak, signed only LB age 7. The night of the exhibit, the gallery glowed. Candlelight flickered across polished floors. Snow fell outside in quiet flurries. I wore black velvet, not mourning but memory. Callan stood near the entry welcoming guests. I floated between displays, accepting nods, hushed admiration. Then they saw it, the piece, the one that made people freeze. Some gasped, others leaned closer, reading between the lines. She's so young, one woman whispered, but this, it's raw, like she lived it. Maribel entered late, wrapped in silk and pride. 2 assistants in tow. She smiled for cameras, laughed for donors. Then her eyes landed on the painting. Still, sharp inhale. Glass slipping in her hand, she caught it just in time. Callan joined me silently. We watched her from across the room. She sees it, he murmured. Not just the art, the truth. I nodded, because the story had never needed captions. It was all right there for the whole town to see. The sister with roses, the mask, the betrayal, the witness, the child who remembered what grown-ups tried to bury. And this time there was no undo button, no charm, no lie smooth enough to erase the truth drawn by innocent hands. The post went live the next morning, a photo of Lyra's painting taken by a college student visiting town for the holidays. No caption, just 2 words. She knew. Within hours, Reddit threads caught fire. Twitter spun wild. Someone found an old wedding photo me missing. Maribel glowing beside Evan. Then came the comments. Isn't that the sister she stole the fiancé from? Wait. The kid drew this. I heard she was silenced for years. Plot twist, looks like she won. The internet did what it always does, dug deeper. An anonymous account leaked screenshots. Emails from Evan to a friend admitting regret, admitting lies. A thread of chats between Maribel and a PR agent coaching her on how to control the story. But stories don't like cages. By day 3, Evan's company issued a statement. Effective immediately, Mr. Thornwell is no longer with us. Callan showed me the headline. I didn't smile, just exhaled, like something old and heavy had finally slid off my chest. Maribel tried to fight back. A glossy post in a designer coat, captioned, "Not everyone can handle success." But the comments turned on her. You mocked your sister. Now look, she didn't need to clap back. Her life did it for her. Lyra asked me that night, did I do something wrong? I held her hand. No, love, you told the truth. And truth sometimes makes noise. Maribel's face disappeared from local magazines. Brands pulled partnerships. She stopped showing up to events. Stopped smiling on cue. She sent me one text, just 3 words. You planned this. I didn't answer because it wasn't true. I hadn't planned anything, just lived. Loved. Let the pieces fall where they were always meant to. 1 week later, the town paper printed a full feature. The Silent Sister, a story of grace after betrayal. They asked me for a quote. I gave them this. Yeah, forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering, without letting it rot you. Some called it poetic, some called it petty. I didn't care. Because I hadn't spoken to win. I'd only spoken when it finally felt quiet enough to hear myself again. The video leaked on a Thursday. Maribel, hair tangled, makeup smudged, sitting on the floor of a hotel hallway, half sobbing, half laughing. I gave them everything she slurred. And they still picked her. Little Selena with her whispery voice and fake damn silence. The clip went viral in hours. Hashtags swarmed. Silent sister. Louder than words. People didn't mock her, they pitied her, which was worse. Evan filed for divorce the next day. His statement read cold, calculated. Callan read it out loud at breakfast. Lyra munched on strawberries unbothered. I thought love was louder than lies, she said. Then went back to drawing. A sun with 3 figures under it, all holding hands. We left for the coast that weekend. No press, no posts, just ocean and wind. Callan drove. Lyra sang in the back. I watched the pines blur past. For the first time in years, I felt unbothered. On the second morning, the innkeeper handed me an envelope. No stamp, just my name. Inside, my mother's handwriting. Shaky, worn. Selena, it began. I saw your face at the gallery. I saw your daughter. I saw myself. She wrote of regret, of years lost, of how she watched from a distance while I was pushed aside, of how she believed Maribel's shine meant truth. I should have known better, she wrote. You were always the strong one. I read it once, then again, then folded it. Callan didn't ask what it said. He never did. I walked to the waterline. Waves lapped my toes. Sea salt clung to my throat. I struck a match, held the letter over flame, watched ink curl and turn to smoke. The ashes danced, then disappeared. I didn't cry, didn't smile, just stood there feeling the wind pull years off my shoulders. Back home, the gallery asked if I wanted to do a follow-up, a second exhibit. I declined. Instead, I helped Lyra organize an art drive for kids who couldn't afford supplies. We called it the Garden Grant, named after Grandma Sybil's yard, where we both learned to see the world in color. Selena the Shadow no longer existed. She didn't need to win. She didn't need revenge. She just needed air and space and people who knew how to love without keeping score. Spring came early that year. Windhaven's snow melted into soft soil. The roses Grandma planted bloomed again. We didn't go back. Didn't need to. Callan started restoring an old train station. Lyra painted every beam with tiny constellations, stars she named after people she trusted. One afternoon, a package arrived. An invitation. Lyra's painting, The Girl with the Roses, had been selected for a student art showcase. She squealed, spinning in the hallway. Callan lifted her in his arms. I just stood there watching my world dance. I wrote an essay that week. The New York Review picked it up. Not a tell-all, not revenge. Just a quiet confession about how sometimes you lose the loudest battles when you scream, and sometimes you win by walking away. I ended with a sentence that came to me like breath. I didn't burn bridges, I built better roads. I still get letters from strangers, from women, from daughters who saw themselves in shadows too long, and I write back when I can. But mostly I live in morning coffee and art class paint, in long walks with Callan and wind tangled in Lyra's hair. No spotlight, no drama. Just love, quiet and whole. Have you ever been underestimated, then surprised everyone by rising? What would Reddit say? Drop your story below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories where silence speaks louder than revenge.